Good morning. I'm Arlene Macklin, and I have been with the Washington, Baltimore, Hampton Roads LSMCE program since inception. And so that's been 20 years. But we actually in 2000, the year 2000, we decided to expand the alliance and added three more schools. So our baseline data for the center is really starting with the year 2000. And I just want to go briefly on some of that. Our enrollment, you see the enrollment here. We have 7 schools in our alliance. Howard University is the lead institution. Then we have Bowie State, Morgan State, University of the District of Columbia, Hampton University, Virginia State University, and Norfolk State University. So we have 7 schools. And our enrollment, we are the largest alliance serving African Americans in the country. And our enrollment for this currently is close to a little over 8,000 students. So we should be, if the situation were ideal, if everything were ideal, we should be actually graduating about 2,000, a little over 2,000 students a year in STEM. This is our STEM enrollment. Now, what have we done in that since 2000? We have produced over 16,000 bachelor's degrees, 1,600 master's degrees, and 460 PhD degrees. Most of those PhD degrees have actually been produced by Howard University, but since 2000, we've had a number of schools within the Alliance who've actually established PhD programs, including Morgan State in engineering, Bowie State in computer science, Norfolk State in material science and engineering, and of course Howard, and the rest of the schools. UDC, I don't think they don't have any PhD program. But one of the hallmarks of our program, and I have been an advocate of this certainly since 2005, is that all of our students in STEM should have 3 internships, one with a major research university, one with a national laboratory, and an international experience. And we have been able to bring in the international component, which was hard initially. In fact, when I started advocating this, I had no idea how we were going to do the international part. And what comes along but the grace of God? And in comes the Intelligence Community Center for Academic Excellence. And guess who got one? I did. Pan Am got one too, in El Paso as well. In that first solicitation, the first solicitation in 2006, we got a Norfolk State. I was at Norfolk State at the time, and we got a CAE program. And what that meant for us was that we could introduce, at the time, in 2006, Norfolk State did not offer any major in a foreign language, none. They had discontinued the French major in 1992 because of budgetary constraints. And so the only language that you could major in at Norfolk State was English. But this program brought in 3 languages. It brought in Arabic, Japanese, and Chinese, which really revolutionized our campus. And through that program, since 2006, we have supported more than 100 students going to Morocco to learn Arabic, Egypt to learn Arabic, Japan to learn Japanese, China to learn Chinese, Tunisia to learn Arabic. Now I'm taking students to India. I take typically 12 to 15 students a year to India. And we have introduced 2 new languages into our schools now, Hindi and Bengali. Bowie has introduced Bengali, and we introduced Hindi to the other 4 schools last year. So that has really been a marvelous thing. And I would really, what I said let me tell you, from 2006 to 2009, our CAE was the top producer of internships. And what we did at Norfolk State was that my thing was, I said, I want every science major to layer your major with a language. And we and the intelligence community couldn't snap them up fast enough. We were producing probably the optical engineering program, which I started in the face of a physics program that produced 2 or 3 students. In our peak in 2007, we had over 100 students. That's not the case anymore. But the point is, we were producing 20, 25 optical engineering students. And some of those students, about 2/3 of them went into the job market. They got jobs in the intelligence community. And the other third are in are either finished PhD programs or are in PhD programs. I've just had the delight of one of my students just finished her PhD at the University of Connecticut and has just taken a postdoc at Princeton in biomedical engineering, who is one of my optical engineering students. And we've also had, since 2004, since the LSMCE was a mature center, we started getting the Bridges to the Doctorate program in 2004. So we've got 3, 2004, 2006, and 2008. And we have actually, during that period, the numbers are, we've admitted 60 Bridges to the Doctorate students. 50 of those were admitted to the PhD program. 10 have gotten master's degrees, and the others are in process. And one of the things that I don't want to talk about this slide. This is just all of the data overview. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, and it was sort of eclipsed yesterday by the film that Juanita offered, and also by the young man. I was so impressed with this young man yesterday. And he said, the young Latino man who was on the panel, he said, I started at the community college at Olive Harvey. Then I went to Chicago State and got my degree. And now I'm at Caltech in a postdoctoral program. How do we actually talk about the return on investment for what happens to this young man and the hundreds of other people that were in our film yesterday? And let me just, this is old now. I've rethought this now. But the WBHR program since 2000 at Howard has gotten $12 million. We produce about 5.3% of all the BS degrees for minorities in the country. We're the largest producers of all in the nation for African Americans, and we provide direct access for research to a large number of students. And we also, Howard has the unusual opportunity to offer students research at some of our major national facilities. In fact, I didn't do an outhouse PhD at Howard, because that's what I call it. I was a theoretician, but we used to call it outhouse because you could do your PhD at ONR, you could do it at a National Research Lab, NIST, National Institute of Standards, then NIH. So a variety of places. Students can actually have dual mentoring by faculty at Howard as well as at some of the national facilities. That's unique to Washington, D.C. And the bridge, so we've only had $12 million for that. And in the Bridges to the Doctorate program, about $3 million and 60 students. So how do you measure that? And one of the things I've said is, well, how do we measure return on investment? It's a very difficult thing. And so many of you who know me know I talk a lot, but I rarely talk about myself. And I'm going to do something very unusual for me today, and that is to talk about myself, because in January of this year, I was selected to be a history maker, and filmmakers came to my house, and I talked for 5.5 hours about myself. And it's all now in the historymaker.org website. But my early beginnings are very different, maybe very similar to many of yours, and that is, I was born on a rural farm in Virginia, tobacco farm. My mother had a 7th grade education, and my father a 3rd grade education. But my mother was very unusual in that she knew both the Latin name and the common name for more than 1,000 plants. I have no idea how she learned the Latin name. But I was born feet first. That's true. Don't laugh at it. Please don't laugh. And so I was born the 9th out of 10 children, feet first. But one of the things that happened was my mother said, well, her feet do look a little different, but she didn't pay much attention to it. It was June. We're still in the farm and busy. Everybody's busy in June on the farm. And so my aunt comes, my paternal aunt comes to visit the new baby in July, which she always came in July. And she says, Alice and Armstead, something is wrong with that child's feet. So she said, you need to bring that child to Richmond. And they did. They took me to Richmond, and it turned out that my feet were like this. That's the way I was born. And so I was taken to Richmond at 3 months old, and I had 9 operations on my feet to get them straight. I want you to show them to you now. Nobody can outwalk me. Now what I do is this. I have my feet, shoes molded, custom made, and I go to South Africa, get the ostrich skin and put on my shoes. Okay? So, they used to laugh at me, but no more. But the point is, how do you measure that? And I have in my as I was talking to the young man here today, I have mentored more than I don't even know. I do virtual mentoring. I'm right now mentoring 2 young Hispanic women in physics. One is at Berkeley and one is at Vanderbilt, because I went to a SACNAS meeting 2 years ago and I sat at the elders table and they said, we want you to mentor me. I said, great, I'd love to. And so I do a lot of virtual mentoring. So I don't even know how many students I've mentored, but I do know since 2006, I have mentored directly over 100 African American males, and they all have degrees in STEM, and similarly over 100 females. So how do you measure the impact? What is the return on investment of a person like that? And I say it's indefinite. And my colleague who's in the audience, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Mary Johnson, are you here? I want you to go to Salon C this afternoon to hear her at 11:10, and also Dr. Clarence Lee. These are the people who really have made much, much greater impact than I could ever imagine.
Is it Dr. Fast? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to change my mind about what I'm doing. There's a PowerPoint up here, 28 slides. They're beautiful. They're terrific. I'm not going to show it. So I'm going to try to move quickly. Colorado AMP, which is COAMP in the state of Colorado. First thing I want to tell you about is the cultural differences of being in the West versus being in the East or the Midwest. The Colorado AMP covers 36,000 square miles. That's bigger than South Carolina or Massachusetts. We can't see all our folks all the time. We cover 5 different systems, 13 schools. Every major school in the state of Colorado is involved in the AMP. And so it's very, very difficult for us to coordinate activities based on distances and based on differences in culture at each of the individual schools. Now, we've managed to increase over that period of time, over the 18 years, increase our number of underrepresented students graduating by 188%. However, most of that, I believe, is accounted for by the increases in the numbers of students attending our institution and not by our interventions. We've managed to retain students at the same level throughout. We've managed to cut the difference between majority and underrepresented students' graduation rate in STEM, but we have not actually eclipsed it, and I don't think, in our case, our graduation rate in STEM in the state of Colorado is about 20%. Now, Colorado is a very interesting state. We are 1, 2, or 3, depending on when you take the data, most educated state in the United States. We are 48th in funding of higher education. We are 50th in the differential between underrepresented students getting bachelor's degrees and majority students getting bachelor's degrees. It's known as the Colorado paradox. We are the 3rd most wired state in the United States. We are one of the top 5 technology states in the United States. We have one of the fastest growing Hispanic populations in the country. 20% of the population of Colorado is Latino, but over almost 50% of the school-age population in Colorado is Latino. And yet of 100 ninth graders, we only graduate 22 in over 6 years in college. So we have a number of issues that we're trying to address. So in the last few years, one of the things we've done is we took Dr. Hurtado's research from UCLA, and we tried to apply the issues of what are the major reasons she said that our students were leaving. Financial reasons, number 1, mathematics, number 2, science identity, number 3, and cultural issues, number 4. Well, because we have 13 institutions and because we are a somewhat rural state, 2.5 million people, the actual budget for the LSAMP in Colorado is not that high. And so we can't directly do some of the things that Texas does or some of the other schools do in terms of supporting students. So we have to leverage our money in interesting ways and different ways. Because of that, we have to integrate with the state in ways that we've been trying to increase. So one of the things we did is start looking at math performance. I mean, what's going on with math? The graduation rate across all students in Colorado out of college is only 50%. Now, that varies by school. Colorado School of Mines has a much higher graduation rate. So when I'm comparing Colorado School of Mines to Metro State, which is an urban master's program in Denver, there's no we have very different cultures, very different issues. Colorado is number 5 in importing technological jobs and bachelor's degree students into the state. Matter of fact, we are in the second tier in terms of technological states in needing to import students. And yet we have this growing population and we're not making the impact that we need to make. So what I'm here to tell you is that we have some states where, yesterday, I do believe in resilience. I think that resilience is an important issue. We need to look at the successful students. But in Colorado, we've had a number of dramatic disasters in the last 2 years. Last year, when I was in Washington at JAM, Colorado was on fire. This year, we had historic floods. Now, sometimes there are floods. And sometimes there are fires, and we need to know why there are floods and fires. So knowing why some systems are failing is just as important. Colorado has managed to get rid of almost all of its native population except for the southern Utes and the mountain Utes. And they did it through genocide and chasing everybody out. And that's a historic legacy in Colorado. We're almost as bad as Texas in terms of some of that legacy of racism and genocide, which I think still permeates our institutions in many ways. So yes, we need to address all of those of us who have managed to succeed. But we need to look at what are the systems that are limiting success for our students. And how do we change those systems in the K-12 pipeline in particular? So those are some of the things we're trying to do in Colorado. I was a much happier person on Sunday before I came, and the hospitality has been great from the folks at here, but I don't think the Colts were very nice to the Broncos. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm Herb Schroeder. I founded the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program in 1995, and I'm a professor of engineering at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. And the way AMP fits in here is AMP is the undergraduate portion of the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program, and it was really the first piece of this longitudinal model that we had developed since 1995. I know the Colorado AMP is pretty big, but you know, that's small potatoes for Alaska. So I like to lay this map on top of what we call the 48 at home, or we call outside at home, just so that you can get a sense of what it's like. There's about 600,000 people here, maybe a little more. There's no roads in this place. And when I started, I couldn't find an Alaska Native kid in the state who had successfully completed trigonometry in high school. And I set out then to effect a systemic change in hiring patterns for Alaska Natives in the science and engineering professions. And I'll go into a lot more detail about that when I talk again at lunchtime about how we did this. But what AMP did for us at home was to catalyze development of a whole longitudinal model where we now start with 5th and 6th grade kids, and we can take them all the way through the PhD. I had one student in 1995, and right now there's 1,250 students and alumni in this pipeline, about 290 now students who've graduated with BS degrees. One of the first things I recognized was that in order to keep my kids safe on the campus, we were going to have a place. So I organized a group of partner organizations, and they provided us with this building that's become our home. And one of my students, she was adamant that it had to shout Native, because as she said it, people have told us we can't be here, and we're not leaving, and we want to be in their face. And so they built it like a canoe. Another thing that we recognized we'd need if we were going to institutionalize this long term would be for the students to have a faculty advocate in perpetuity. And once again, our partners pulled together and provided us with $4.5 million so that we could permanently endow a chair. These are some kids, middle school kids, building computers. And this is something we're working on now. We expect to break ground on that this summer. It's another building. This is much bigger than the previous building. It's a place where we can do our middle school academy. And the first 2 floors are all lab space, and the top 2 floors are residence halls. So we have 128 beds for middle school kids when they come on our campus. And then we can just take them downstairs and do hands-on science and engineering with them and keep them safe the whole time they're on our campus. Another thing that we're doing to institutionalize our work, and we've got philanthropic funds to send 4 of our key staff members off to Harvard for their professional leadership development program. And that's starting up in January. The first one goes off in January. And this guy on the right, his name is Matt Calhoun. He's one of our alumni. And there's actually another alumni here, Michelle Yachmanev, who's doing a PhD in engineering education at Purdue. And we've reserved places for them on the faculty when they're finished with their PhDs and come back to Alaska. That was a major challenge because right now there's 40 engineering faculty in Alaska, and there's no underrepresented minorities on our faculty. There's 2 women, and 1 is a Chinese woman. And just this year, after 19 years of effort, we've managed to begin to get state general fund support to support our staff. We've had our budget's about $4.5 million a year, and $250,000 of that, $250,000 comes from AMP. And we've had to raise all that money every year to pay for our staff from philanthropic funds. There's a graduate school component. We've got 16 students enrolled in this right now. We've graduated 3 PhDs and 9, I think, master's degrees as of last May. And this shows our enrollment pattern since we started. There's right at 500 students enrolled in science and engineering right now. And these are students that come in with requiring no remediation. This is one of my fundamental rules. We're never going to get caught up in remediating students when they show up at the university. That's somebody else's job. And to get those students prepared, and they're not doing it, so we actually go back and get those students prepared before they roll into our university, and I'll talk about that more later. And this is our degrees. I feel so inadequate when I look at 16,000 bachelor's degrees, but there's only 100,000 Alaska Native people in the world. So this is something that's interesting. In 2007, 2010, we've had people come in and do external evaluation of the different pieces of the various components of ANSEP. And we require that students do certain things in order to be funded through our program. There's 4 things. One is that they come to a meeting every single week in a building that we built on our campus, and we eat pizza, and we have industrial people come in, and the students do presentations of what they do on their summer internships and research projects. So that's the first thing. Students have to complete 24 credits a year and get a 2.5 or better. Students have to work a summer internship with one of our partner organizations. And students have to come to organized study groups once a week for every single class they're enrolled in. And then they can get $1 through our program. We give them about 1/3 of the money that they need to attend the university. And the first time we did this, the thing that is ranking what students consider the most important aspects, they said, researcher came and said 95% of your students think the Friday pizza meetings are the most important thing. And I said, this person's crazy, you know? And it can't be right. And she said, no, we cross-validated it and used all that, all the language of evaluators. And I said, okay. So we put it away, waited till 2010, did another evaluation with exactly the same, with a different group of students, and this time 100% of them said the most important thing. So I'm beginning to believe it's the most important thing, you know. So now we have, the Urban Institute has come in with a SWAT team of PhDs to evaluate exactly why things like this are true, because we're interested in understanding what happens in those Friday meetings, exactly what happens, and why students consider those so important. And that's it. Thank you. Dr. Sheila Edwards-Lang. How'd I do?
Great. Let's see if I can find my presentation on here. I see Ernie. Okay, I don't even see mine on here. Okay, who put my slides on here? Michelle or someone? It's not here. I don't see it. No staff? Is there no staff here? I know I did. Oh, wait, maybe that's it. I did mine first. Nope, that's not it. Great. I do have it on a jump drive. Okay, so while I'm getting my PowerPoint, I want to start by just thanking and acknowledging all of those who helped us. We are a relatively new AMP in the Pacific Northwest. And when we were starting, Ben Flores and his team were extremely helpful to us as we made calls to get information. And I also have to thank the people who organized this conference, because as a newer AMP, this has really helped us get started. I also want to thank those who do the work, and 4 of them are here today. Ellen Momson from Oregon State, and Catherine Jordan and Stephanie Gardner from my campus, who are actually doing a session after this on their work providing international experiences for our students. So this is how, always helps to have a backup plan. There you go. And then Linda Mantell, who, when we started this process, was one of the few of us in the Pacific Northwest who actually had some experience with AMP, having worked in the New York AMP. And she's here, and I want to thank her for being here today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our alliance and give you some data and talk about the institutional impact, and then a little bit about what we're trying to do in the future. Our alliance is actually 3 states, so we're Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. We have 5 bachelor degree granting institutions. Our university provosts are the principal investigators. We partnered with science centers, MESA, which is Math, Engineering, Science Achievement Program, and community colleges. We structured ourselves in a way that we would get day-to-day, on-the-ground information from our steering committee, and those are the folks who are doing the work on the campuses. Each campus has a faculty and student advisory committee, and then we have a governing board that's made up of our provosts, our science and engineering deans, our directors of partner programs, and then we have a corporate advisory committee that includes people from Intel, Boeing, Microsoft, and others. We have alliance-wide activity, things that we do together, as well as campus-specific activity. We have 3 primary goals: to increase our pathways to college, to encourage underrepresented students to participate in undergraduate research, and to create a culture and climate of success by community building with our students. In terms of pathways, we have activities where we're working with our community college partners to bring students onto campus. We have, with our science center, they have a discovery core of high school students who are interested in STEM. We actually bring those students to our annual conference. Every campus provides undergraduate research opportunities for the students and provides stipends for that. And then at our annual research conference, we have opportunities for our students to present that research. We have a poster competition. And then we also encourage our students to go to other national meetings to submit their posters for national conferences. And so we've had a number of our students go to the Emerging Researchers Conference that is put on in DC, as well as others. And then we actually have 5 or 6 students with us here today, because we strongly encourage them, whenever there's an opportunity to present, to submit abstracts for their posters. Every campus has a variety of programs, but the things that we have in common are the undergraduate research, summer bridge programs, dedicated LSMCE centers on each one of our campuses with space for students to study and have access to computers and that kind of thing. And then we try and have formal and informal student communities. We actually started something our first year that was unfunded. We actually didn't have it in the proposal, but it turned out to be one of the best things. Herb was one of those things where the students said that they really loved it, and we're like, but we didn't plan for it. And that is, we have an annual retreat where we bring the students together from all of the Alliance campuses. They love it. It's not funded, but it's something that students highly rate it. Over the years, we've actually, as I said, we're just in our year 5 of our first phase. Our goal is to double the number of degrees that we were granting when we started. Our pre-grant 5-year average was about 300 degrees amongst our 5 institutions. And as our most recent numbers are, we're at 547 STEM degrees granted to underrepresented students. One of the things that it's important to note that our growth here has been much higher than the rate of growth for non-underrepresented students. So we've had a 72% increase in the number of degrees granted to underrepresented students, but on our campuses, the growth in STEM degrees has only been about 22%. So we think that this is evidence that our alliance is working well. The other thing that we're monitoring is our enrollments by class level. We have a lot of transfer students, and so we also have this thing at the University of Washington of pre-STEM majors, so they are not counted as freshmen and sophomores. So we have low numbers of freshmen and sophomores, and then we, as students are declaring majors or getting into majors, we have these big bumps in our junior and senior classes, and so, which is great for us because what we've experienced is that then has led to helping us to meet our numbers of degrees that we are on track. We're on track to have our 625 by the end of this year. And one of the things that's unusual about our alliance, and I know that others, as they're struggling with community college partnerships, and our community college partnerships are by no means perfect. We are continuing to work on that. But we have already about 35% of our degrees that we're granting to underrepresented students come from students who start as transfer students. Now, it's, I put the 5 four-year institutions up here so you can see that there are great variations amongst the institutions, but we are very proud that we are getting underrepresented students in STEM from our community college partners and from others. And so as we look forward to our next phase, that is part of what we want to work on, is to grow this transfer population. It's amazing to me that there were things, you know, we knew that we would work with students, and I had some idea that we would have some institutional impact, but I think the most surprising for me is the depth of the institutional impact that our alliance has had. So for each one of our campuses, we've had this increased emphasis on STEM degree production, and Lewis Stokes has been, our LSMCE program has been in the middle of it, connected to all of our new campus programs. We've gotten new STEP grants, new STEM grants, new Department of Education Upper Bound Science and Math grants, student support STEM grants. We started a new program based out of Colorado where we have a gold shirt program for freshmen at WSU and University of Washington, where we come in and students actually following an athletic model red shirt for a year as they're trying to get into engineering. And we've had changes in our campus admissions policies. One of the things that we've noticed, and we're actually working on this issue about the pre-STEM issue, is that many of our students, we didn't even know who they were. So I'm trying to identify who are the students with an interest in STEM. And so we work with our admissions offices to change a lot of our practices so that we could identify students when they come in. We have STEM ambassadors, specifically students who help us host students on campus, host tours, plan visits, that kind of thing. And actually, as students are admitted, help us with yield activities. We've had changes in improved STEM advising and retention programs, new campus partnerships and collaborations. We've been really, really fortunate to be able to get faculty members to write our Lewis Stokes Alliance students in for undergraduate research, paid in undergraduate research experiences. We've partnered with faculty members as they have done career grants. McNair has written us into their grants. On 4 of our 5 campuses have McNair, and they have reserved research spots for our LSAM students, so that's been really wonderful. We have stronger student societies. For example, at Oregon State, the number of students in NSBE and SHIP have doubled. And we have other campuses now that don't have NSBE or SHIP or SOCNUS that are looking to start those. And part of that grew out of the community building as students are going to retreats and conferences and meeting other students on other campuses and learning about what they are doing and then replicating that on the campuses where it doesn't exist. But most importantly, and finally, I think the thing that has happened for all of our campuses is that we have a new way of behaving. There are new norms now for when we are thinking about starting a new program or starting a new initiative. And we'll get an email from our colleagues from other campuses saying, we're thinking about doing this. Are you doing this on your campus, or do you know anyone else, any other alliance that might be doing this kind of work? And do you know of any research on this? So before we start any new initiative, we're checking with each other, checking with other alliances, and trying to see what's the research. And so really looking at research-based practices And then saying, you know, we really need to have some data and outcomes associated with it. So building assessment and evaluation into what we're doing before we even started. And I know that's a new norm for the University of Washington, and I hear from my colleagues that it's a new norm for them as well. And so it's just a new way of being. And all of these institutional changes contribute then to us being better able to serve students, to identify students, and graduate students with STEM degrees. So with that, there you go.